International relations are often shaped by treaties and military might, but today, economic tools are at the forefront. The U.S. move to restrict high-tech jet engine exports to China was a calculated attempt to slow Beijing's rise in commercial aviation. Targeting CFM International's LEAP engine, Washington aimed to cripple China's aerospace ambitions. This marked a major escalation in the US-China tech rivalry, extending beyond semiconductors into aviation. The policy assumed China's dependence on Western technology was unbreakable. But instead of halting China's progress, the restrictions sparked a national drive for self-reliance. China accelerated domestic programs and reconfigured partnerships, turning intended obstacles into motivation. The outcome revealed the limits of economic sanctions and the determination of a nation to chart its own course. This is the story of how China's aviation dreams took flight despite efforts to ground them. For decades, Boeing and Airbus ruled the skies, but China set out to challenge this duopoly. The COMAC C919, a narrow-body jet, became the symbol of China's ambition to break free from technological dependency. Building the C919 meant creating an entire aerospace ecosystem, not just an airplane. Its success would secure a share of the world's fastest-growing aviation market and establish China as a global contender. The C919's advanced design and technology made it a modern marvel, but its reliance on Western engines was a vulnerability. The first commercial flights in 2023 were celebrated as a national achievement. With a massive domestic market, China's challenge to the duopoly was real and growing. The C919 was no longer a dream, it was airborne. The U.S. move to block engine exports was driven by fears that China would use Western technology to boost its military and industrial power. Jet engines, with their dual-use potential, became a focal point of concern. Washington worried China could reverse engineer the CFM LEAP engines, eroding a key U.S. advantage. The restrictions aimed to cripple China's commercial aviation ambitions and protect American industry. The hope was to force China to abandon its aerospace goals or accept U.S.-dictated rules. This was economic warfare, a high-stakes gamble on American technological supremacy. The message, access to U.S. technology, was a privilege, not a right. The engine ban was meant to be a choke point, betting China had no alternative. But this test of wills would have consequences far beyond the aviation sector. The future of the U.S.-China relationship was on the line. China didn't back down in the face of an engine embargo. It adapted. Beijing leveraged its European partnerships, especially with France, to keep engine sales alive and exploit divisions among Western allies. Simultaneously, China turbocharged its domestic engine program, the CJ1000A, making it a top national priority. Research institutes and state-owned enterprises united in a nationwide push for technological self-reliance. The C919 program began systematically replacing vulnerable foreign components with domestic alternatives. This drive for innovation extended beyond engines to materials, software, and manufacturing. China adopted a dual-track strategy, securing Western engines for early C919s while racing to certify its own. The initial U.S. threats didn't result in a full ban, partly due to pressure from industry and allies. Meanwhile, China's parallel approach allowed uninterrupted production and reduced future risk. The crisis became a catalyst for resilience and ingenuity. China's response was not just technical, it was strategic, reshaping its entire approach to critical industries. The era of assuming access to Western technology was over. China was now determined to control its own destiny. U.S. sanctions forced China to rethink the C919's global supply chain. Originally, the aircraft relied on top American and European suppliers, but this model became a liability. China shifted from best-in-world sourcing to secure and reliable sourcing, mapping every foreign-sourced component. COMAC sought alternative suppliers in less U.S.-aligned countries and built new international partnerships. The biggest change was a massive push for domestic substitution, covering everything from avionics to landing gear. While early Chinese components lagged behind Western ones, they offered immunity from sanctions. The C919 became a driver of indigenous innovation, strengthening China's industrial base. Each new production block increased the share of domestic parts. Modular design allowed for seamless replacement of foreign systems as Chinese versions became available. The supply chain evolved into a dynamic, resilient system, built for a new era. The C919's journey from concept to commercial reality was marked by technical and political challenges. Launched in 2008, the project aimed to rival Boeing and Airbus within a decade. The first prototype appeared in 2015, and the maiden flight in 2017 was a national milestone. U.S. pressure mounted in 2020, threatening to block LEAP engine exports and casting doubt on the program's future. China pressed on, focusing on domestic certification and pushing the C919 through rigorous testing. In 2022, the C919 was certified by Chinese authorities and delivered to China Eastern Airlines. Commercial service began in 2023, proving the program's resilience. While initial C919s used Western engines, the domestic CJ1000A made rapid progress and completed test flights in 2025. Certification of the Chinese engine is expected soon, marking the final step toward aviation independence. Western pressure didn't stop the C919. It accelerated China's push for self-sufficiency. The C919's successful launch has shaken the Boeing-Airbus duopoly. For the first time in decades, a credible third competitor has emerged in the narrow-body market. COMAC's initial focus is domestic, but its global ambitions are clear. The C919's competitive pricing and lack of Western political baggage appeal to airlines in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. This new competition benefits airlines and consumers, driving down prices and spurring innovation. The industry is entering a more dynamic, competitive era. However, the rise of the C919 also signals a fragmentation of global aviation standards. China is promoting its own certification system, creating parallel regulatory spheres. The world may soon see two competing technological ecosystems in aviation. Supply chains will become more complex as companies adapt to this bifurcation. The U.S. engine ban didn't preserve the old order. It forced the creation of a new multipolar landscape. The C919 story reveals the limits of sanctions in halting a determined nation's progress. Restrictions may cause delays, but they often fuel innovation and self-reliance. U.S. efforts to contain China have accelerated its push for indigenous technology across sectors. The world is moving from a single, globalized tech ecosystem to parallel ones, one Western, one Chinese. This decoupling will reshape innovation, trade, and security for years to come. The U.S. must shift from blocking China to outpacing it through investment and innovation. Alliances, R&D, and a skilled workforce are now more critical than ever. The real competition will be won with breakthroughs, not bans. The C919 is just one chapter in a larger race for technological leadership. The challenge for the U.S. is to adapt and lead in this new environment. The C919's takeoff marks a turning point in global power dynamics. The era of U.S. unilateral technological dominance is over. The failed engine ban showed that no single nation can dictate outcomes indefinitely. China's resilience proved that determined states can absorb pressure and develop independent capabilities. The C919 is a symbol of a multipolar world, where power is more diffuse and competition is the norm. The lesson for Washington: focus on competitiveness, not containment. Invest in innovation and build coalitions for a rules-based order. The goal isn't to stop China from flying, but to ensure Western planes remain world-class. The roar of the C919's engines signals a new era, one shaped by many, not just one. The failure to ground the C919 didn't just launch a plane, it launched a new world.